Now let's begin. Mitchell Powers had spent 12 years building a life most men would envy. At 36, he ran a private forensic accounting firm that specialized in tracking digital fraud for corporate clients. His work required patience, precision, and an ability to see patterns others missed. He'd met Donna Hutchins at a charity auction where he'd been analyzing a suspected embezzlement case. She was volunteering, radiant in a blue dress that matched her eyes. They married within a year. Their son Danny arrived 2 years later, a bright-eyed boy who inherited Mitchell's analytical mind and Donna's warm heart. By 7, Danny could solve puzzles meant for children twice his age and had memorized every dinosaur species in existence. Mitchell taught him chess on Sunday mornings. Their small Chicago suburb felt safe, predictable, comfortable. Dennis Hutchins was a different matter entirely. Donna's father had retired 5 years earlier from a middle management position at a pharmaceutical distribution company. He lived 40 minutes away with Judith, Donna's mother, in a sprawling house that always felt too quiet. Dennis was 62. With gray hair, he kept military short and pale blue eyes that never seemed to blink. He smiled often, but the expression never reached those eyes. Mitchell had learned to tolerate him for Donna's sake, though something about Dennis made his instincts prickle. "He's just old-fashioned," Donna would say whenever Mitchell mentioned his discomfort. "My dad's from a different generation." But Mitchell noticed things. The way Dennis watched people when he thought no one was looking. How he'd make cutting remarks disguised as jokes, then act wounded if anyone took offense. The strange stories he'd tell about his childhood that never quite added up. Small things that individually meant nothing, but collectively formed a pattern Mitchell couldn't ignore. Still, he kept his concerns private. Dennis had never done anything overtly wrong, and Judith seemed happy enough. Danny called them Grandma and Grandpa and got excited for their monthly visits. Mitchell told himself he was being paranoid, projecting his professional suspicions onto his personal life. That changed on a Saturday in late October. "Dad wants to take Danny fishing," Donna mentioned over breakfast. Up at Cedar Lake. Just the two of them, grandpa-grandson bonding. Mitchell set down his coffee. "I didn't know your father fished." "He used to, when I was little. He's been talking about getting back into it." Donna smiled at Danny, who was already bouncing in his chair. "Danny's so excited." Mitchell studied his son's eager face. 7 years old, still young enough to think the world was fundamentally good. "Maybe I should come along." "Mitchell." Donna's tone carried a warning. "He wants time with his grandson. You hover too much." "I don't hover." "You absolutely hover. Let them have this." Dennis arrived at 6 in the morning, his pickup truck loaded with fishing gear that looked brand new, price tags still visible on some items. He wore a camouflage jacket and cargo pants, boots that had never seen a trail. Everything too perfect, too staged. Ready sport. Dennis's smile was wide as Danny ran out with his small backpack. "Grandpa, are we really going to catch a giant fish?" "Biggest one in the lake." Dennis ruffled Danny's hair without looking at him, his eyes on Mitchell. "Don't wait up. These things take time. Probably be back around dinner." Mitchell crouched to Danny's level. "Listen to Grandpa, okay? And if anything feels wrong." "Mitchell." Donna appeared behind him. "He'll be fine." Mitchell watched the truck pull away, Dennis's hand raised in a casual wave. That prickle of unease had become a cold knot in his stomach. But what could he say? "My gut tells me your father might hurt our son." Based on what evidence? Strange looks and odd stories. He went to his home office and tried to focus on work. A hospital network suspected one of their administrators was creating ghost employees and collecting their salaries. Normally this kind of puzzle would consume him, but today he kept checking his phone, expecting updates that never came. Lunch passed. Afternoon stretched long. Donna seemed unconcerned, working in the garden, humming to herself. Mitchell called Dennis twice. Both times it went to voicemail. "They're probably out on the lake where there's no signal," Donna said. "Stop worrying." By 6 o'clock, the knot in Mitchell's stomach had become a scream. By 7, he was pacing. By 8, when Dennis's truck finally pulled into the driveway, Mitchell was out the door before it fully stopped. Dennis climbed out alone. "Where's Danny?" Mitchell's voice was sharp. Dennis moved slowly, methodically, like a man who'd had a long day. "Now don't panic. He wandered off about 3 hours ago. I've been searching the woods around the lake. Finally gave up and figured I should come get help." The words hit Mitchell like ice water. "You left him? You've been searching for 3 hours, and you didn't call." "No signal up there, like I said. Look, kids wander off." He's probably just exploring. Mitchell's fist was halfway to Dennis's face when Donna grabbed his arm. Mitchell, stop. We need to find Danny. The next 4 hours were a nightmare. Local police organized a search party. Volunteers from the neighborhood joined. Mitchell drove to Cedar Lake with 3 officers, his hands shaking on the wheel. Dennis rode with Donna, explaining calmly how they'd been fishing near the North Shore when Danny said he wanted to explore. Dennis had told him not to go far. When he looked up from baiting a hook, the boy was gone. I called for him, Dennis said. Searched everywhere. You know how kids are. They found Danny at 1:47 a.m. An elderly volunteer named Raoul Burton, a retired postal worker who knew every inch of the Cedar Lake trails, heard something near an old maintenance road. A whimper, faint and broken. He followed the sound to an abandoned utility well, partially covered by rotted boards. Danny was at the bottom, 15 feet down. He'd been there for 9 hours. The paramedics brought him up carefully. Hypothermia. His core temperature had dropped to 92 degrees. His left arm was broken, compound fracture, bone visible through torn skin. Cuts and bruises covered his small body. But worst were his eyes, those bright, curious eyes that now looked hollow, terrified, fundamentally changed. Mitchell rode in the ambulance, holding Danny's good hand while medics worked. Danny was conscious but barely responsive, shivering despite the thermal blankets. He stared at nothing, lips moving soundlessly. At the hospital, doctors stabilized him. The hypothermia could have killed him within another hour, they said. The broken arm required surgery. They sedated him, and Mitchell sat beside the bed, watching his son's chest rise and fall, each breath a small miracle. Donna arrived with her mother. Judith was crying, pale and shaken. Dennis stood behind them, his face arranged in an expression of concern that didn't quite work. Something about the angle of his mouth, the steadiness of his gaze. I don't understand how this happened, Judith said. Dennis, you said you were watching him. I was. Kids are quick. I turned around for 1 second. 9 hours. Mitchell's voice was quiet but cut through the room like a blade. You searched for 9 hours and didn't find a well 15 feet from where you were fishing. Dennis met his eyes. It was covered. I didn't see it. But you heard him, didn't you? Something flickered across Dennis's face. What? The well was covered but not sealed. Sound carries up from those things. He was screaming down there. For hours. And you were nearby. You heard him. I didn't hear anything. Why would I? Get out. Mitchell stood. Get the fuck out of this hospital. Mitchell. Donna moved between them. Stop it. This was an accident. A horrible accident. Was it? Mitchell looked at his wife, seeing the denial in her eyes. She needed it to be an accident because anything else was unthinkable. Ask him yourself. Dennis, did you hear Danny screaming? Dennis's face was calm, neutral. But his eyes, those pale blue eyes that never blinked, held something Mitchell had never seen before. Something that made his blood freeze. Dennis smiled. Just barely. Just a subtle curve at the corner of his mouth. Of course I didn't. What kind of monster would leave a child in a well? He held Mitchell's gaze for 3 seconds, and in those 3 seconds, Mitchell saw the truth. This wasn't negligence. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. Dennis turned to leave, pausing at the door. I'm glad he's okay. Kids are resilient. I'm sure he'll bounce back. He left. Judith followed, still crying. Donna sank into a chair, her face in her hands. And Mitchell stood there, understanding with perfect clarity that his father-in-law had tried to kill his son, had stood at the edge of that well listening to Danny's screams, and was going to walk away from it. The next morning, Danny woke up. Mitchell was there, had never left. Danny's eyes found his father's face and filled with tears. His voice was hoarse, damaged from hours of screaming in the cold. Dad, I'm here, buddy. You're safe now. Danny's good hand gripped Mitchell's with surprising strength. Grandpa heard me. Mitchell's heart stopped. What? I fell in the hole. I called for him. I screamed and screamed. Tears ran down Danny's face. He came to the edge. I saw him looking down. I said, Grandpa, help me. I can't get out. And he just stood there. For how long? I don't know. Forever. He was looking at me. Then he smiled and walked away. Danny's voice broke. I kept screaming. It got dark. I was so cold, Dad. Why didn't he help me? Why did he just watch me? Mitchell pulled his son close, careful of the broken arm, feeling the small body shake with sobs. Over Danny's head, he stared at the hospital room wall, his mind working through possibilities with the cold precision he usually reserved for fraud cases. Dennis had deliberately left Danny in that well, had probably led him there, convinced him to climb onto the rotted boards, watched him fall, had stood at the edge listening to a 7-year-old's terrified screams, and walked away. For 9 hours, he'd let Danny suffer in the dark, in the cold, bones broken, certain he was going to die. And Dennis thought he'd gotten away with it. Mitchell made a decision in that moment. Not a rash one driven by rage, though the rage was there, burning like acid. This was the decision of a man who understood systems, patterns, evidence. A man who knew how to dig until he found the truth, no matter how deep it was buried. He would destroy Dennis Hutchins. Not quickly, not simply. He would dismantle the man's entire life piece by piece, expose whatever darkness lived inside him, and make sure Dennis understood exactly who had orchestrated his downfall. But first, he needed to understand what he was dealing with. Because men didn't do what Dennis had done in a vacuum. This kind of cruelty, this calculated sadism, it had a history. Mitchell kissed Danny's forehead. Try to sleep, buddy. You're safe now. I promise. It was a promise he intended to keep. Mitchell took a week off work. He told his partners at the firm that it was for Danny's recovery, which was true but incomplete. Danny needed him, certainly. The boy barely slept, woke up screaming from nightmares about darkness and cold. The surgery on his arm had gone well, but he'd need months of physical therapy. Worse were the psychological wounds. Danny flinched at sudden movements, couldn't stand being alone, had panic attacks in enclosed spaces. Mitchell hired the best child psychologist in Chicago, a woman named Dr. Ellen Moran, who specialized in trauma. She came to their home 3 times a week, working with Danny in patient, gentle sessions. Mitchell sat outside the playroom door during these sessions, listening to his son's halting voice describe the well, the darkness, the cold, the man looking down at him with that smile. Your grandfather didn't mean to hurt you, Dr. Moran would say carefully, trying to provide Danny with a framework that made sense. Sometimes accidents happen. It wasn't an accident. Danny's voice was small but certain. He smiled. Mitchell clenched his fists. Even the psychologist didn't fully believe Danny's account. Adults rarely did when children accused other adults of intentional harm, especially family members. The cognitive dissonance was too great. Better to interpret it as childhood confusion, trauma-distorted memory. But Mitchell had seen Dennis's eyes in that hospital room. He knew. While Danny worked with Dr. Moran, Mitchell worked on Dennis. He started with public records, the same kind of background investigation he'd run on potential employees. Dennis Hutchins, born 1963 in Gary, Indiana. Father worked in the steel mills, died in an industrial accident in 1979. Mother remarried 6 months later, moved to Ohio. Dennis stayed in Indiana, finished high school, attended community college for 2 semesters before dropping out. Employment history showed 23 years at Midwest Pharmaceutical Distribution, starting as a warehouse worker and slowly climbing to a logistics supervisor position. No criminal record. Unremarkable on the surface. But Mitchell knew that the most interesting information wasn't in public records. It was in the gaps, the absences, the things people worked to hide. He called in a favor from Joseph Miranda, a former FBI analyst who now ran a private investigation firm. They'd worked together on a case 2 years ago where a company CFO had been siphoning money to offshore accounts. Joseph had helped trace the digital trail. I need everything you can find on someone, Mitchell said. And I need it to be thorough. Deep background. Connections, associates, places he's lived, places he's worked. Anything sealed or expunged, I need to know about it. How thorough are we talking? The kind of thorough that finds skeletons in unmarked graves. Joseph was quiet for a moment. This personal? Very. Give me the name. While Joseph worked his contacts, Mitchell approached the problem from another angle. He drove to Dennis and Judith's house one afternoon when he knew Dennis would be out. Judith answered the door with red-rimmed eyes. She'd been crying frequently since the incident, guilt eating at her even though she'd done nothing wrong. Mitchell, I wasn't expecting, is Danny okay? He's managing. Can I come in? Judith's home was impeccably clean, decorated with the kind of generic art you bought at furniture stores. Everything matched, everything coordinated. Mitchell had always found it sterile, more like a showroom than a place people actually lived. I wanted to ask you about Dennis, Mitchell said carefully. About his childhood. Judith blinked. His childhood? What? I'm trying to understand what happened. How he could make such a terrible mistake. Sometimes people's past experiences affect how they handle stress. It was manipulation, pure and simple. Giving Judith a framework to rationalize her husband's behavior while extracting information. Mitchell felt briefly guilty, but the image of Danny in that hospital bed erased the feeling. Judith made tea neither of them drank. She talked about meeting Dennis in 1987 at a church function. He'd seemed responsible, stable, a good provider. They'd married quickly. Donna had been born a year later. Did he ever talk about his childhood? His parents? Not much. His father died when he was 16. An accident at the steel plant. Judith's hands trembled slightly as she held her teacup. He didn't like to talk about it. Said it was too painful. And his mother? She remarried. Dennis didn't get along with his stepfather. There was some kind of falling out. He hasn't spoken to her in over 30 years. Do you know why they fell out? Judith looked uncomfortable. He said she chose her new husband over him. That she didn't believe him about something that happened. Believe him about what? He never said. Just that she took the stepfather's side and Dennis left. Mitchell filed that away. A family rupture significant enough to last 3 decades. Did Dennis have siblings? A half-sister from his mother's second marriage. Becky. I met her once, maybe 15 years ago. She came to town and wanted to reconnect with Dennis. He refused to see her. She seemed nice but upset. She said some things about Dennis that I didn't believe. What things? She said he'd hurt her when they were young. That he was dangerous. Judith's voice dropped to a whisper. I thought she was lying, trying to cause problems. Dennis would never. But now Judith wasn't sure. Mitchell could see the doubt in her eyes, the way her hands shook. Do you remember Becky's last name? Wong. She married someone Chinese American. I don't remember the first name. Mitchell left with more pieces of the puzzle. That evening, he sat in his home office, building a timeline. Dennis's father dies in 1979. Dennis is 16. His mother remarries within a year. There's a conflict. Dennis claims he wasn't believed about something. A half-sister named Becky Wong says Dennis hurt her, calls him dangerous. His phone rang. Joseph Miranda. I've got some preliminary information, Joseph said. Your guy's employment history is interesting. Midwest Pharmaceutical wasn't his first job. He worked at 3 other companies before that, all for less than 2 years each. I'm pulling records to find out why he left. What else? Nothing criminal on record, but I found something odd. In 1981, when he was 18, there was a police report filed. A girl went missing in his neighborhood in Gary, 12 years old. They found her 3 days later in an old factory building. She'd been locked in a storage room, dehydrated, traumatized. She claimed a teenage boy had lured her there and locked her in, but she couldn't identify him clearly. The investigation went nowhere. Mitchell's blood ran cold. Dennis would have been 18, and living 2 blocks from the girl's house. Could be coincidence. You don't believe in coincidences any more than I do. No, Joseph agreed. I don't. I'm digging deeper. This might take a few days, but Mitchell, if this guy is what I think he might be, you need to be careful. Men like this, they don't just stop. After hanging up, Mitchell sat in the dark office, thinking. The pattern was emerging. A childhood incident serious enough that his mother didn't believe him and cut him off. A half-sister calling him dangerous. A missing girl found locked in a building near his home. And now Danny, left in a well to freeze and die. This wasn't a one-time snap. This was who Dennis was. His computer chimed. An email from Joseph with an attachment, the 1981 police report. Mitchell opened it, reading through the details. The missing girl was named Susanna Walker. She'd been on her way home from school when someone approached her, told her there were kittens in an abandoned factory building. She'd followed him inside. He'd shoved her into a storage room and locked the door. When police found her, she was severely dehydrated, covered in bruises from trying to break down the door. She described her attacker as a teenage white male with short hair and pale eyes. She said he'd smiled at her before locking the door. He smiled, just like Danny described. Mitchell's hands were shaking now. He forced himself to breathe, to think clearly. Rage wouldn't help Danny. Rage wouldn't bring Dennis to justice. He needed to be smarter than his emotions. Another email arrived. This one from a contact Mitchell had at a private medical records database. Technically illegal to access without permission, but Mitchell was past caring about technicalities. He'd asked for any hospital visits for children in Dennis's household during the years he was raising Donna. 3 emergency room visits. Donna Hutchins, age 4, broken arm from falling downstairs. Donna Hutchins, age 6, severe bruising from accident on playground. Donna Hutchins, age 9, concussion from falling off bike. All treated at different hospitals. All with explanations that were plausible but, taken together, formed a pattern. Mitchell called Donna into his office. She came reluctantly, her face drawn. Things had been tense between them since the incident. She wanted to believe it was an accident. Mitchell's insistence otherwise was driving a wedge between them. "I need to ask you something," Mitchell said gently. "And I need you to really think about it." "Mitchell, please. Not again. When you were a child, did your father ever hurt you?" Donna's expression went carefully blank. "He was strict. That's all." "Donna, 3 ER visits before you were 10. Broken bones. Concussions. I was clumsy. Kids fall. Did you fall? Or did he push you?" "Stop it." Her voice rose. "My father is a good man. He made mistakes, yes, but he would never deliberately. He left Danny in a well for 9 hours. Danny saw him at the edge. He watched and smiled and walked away. Danny was traumatized. He's confused. Is he? Or are you protecting someone who doesn't deserve it?" Donna's eyes filled with tears. "He's my father. And Danny is your son. Who are you going to choose?" It was cruel, forcing her into that position. But Mitchell was past gentle. His son had nearly died. His marriage was fracturing. And the man responsible was eating dinner in his comfortable house, probably smiling about getting away with it. Donna left the office without answering. Mitchell heard her crying in the bedroom. He wanted to follow, to comfort her, but that would mean backing down. And he couldn't do that. Not when he was so close to understanding the full picture. 2 days later, Joseph called again. "I found Dennis's half-sister, Becky Wong, living in Portland. She's willing to talk to you." "Did you tell her what this was about?" "I said her half-brother had been involved in an incident with his grandson. She said she'd been waiting 30 years for someone to ask her about Dennis." Mitchell booked a flight to Portland for the next morning. He told Donna he had a business meeting. She didn't ask for details. They were barely speaking now, passing each other in the house like polite strangers. Becky Wong met him at a coffee shop near her home. She was in her early 40s, with dark hair streaked with gray and sharp, intelligent eyes. She studied Mitchell carefully before speaking. "Your son survived?" she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. You're lucky. Not everyone who encounters Dennis does." Mitchell leaned forward. "Tell me everything." Becky's story came out slowly, painfully. She was 7 years younger than Dennis, born after their mother remarried. Dennis was 16 when she was born, already leaving home. But he'd visit sometimes, and their mother would leave Becky with him while she ran errands. "He'd play games with me," Becky said, her voice flat, emotionless in the way of someone who'd told this story to therapists many times. "Locking me in closets. Once he put me in the basement and turned off the lights, left me there for 6 hours. Another time he took me to a park and lost me in the woods. I was 6. I wandered for hours before a ranger found me." "Your mother didn't believe you?" Dennis would tell her I was being dramatic, making things up for attention. She wanted to believe him because he was her firstborn, and she already felt guilty about remarrying so soon after my father, Dennis's father, died. Becky's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "The final incident happened when I was 8. Dennis offered to babysit. He took me to an old quarry outside town, told me to climb down to look at some special rocks. I climbed down. He pulled up the rope ladder and left. I was down there for 18 hours before someone hiking nearby heard me screaming." Mitchell felt sick. "And your mother still didn't believe you?" She confronted Dennis. "He said I'd wandered off on my own, that I was trying to get him in trouble. She believed him. She always believed him." Becky met Mitchell's eyes. "I stopped trying to convince her after that. When I was 18, I moved across the country and never looked back. I've tried to warn people over the years, his wife, a few neighbors, but no one listens. Dennis is too good at seeming normal. He has a daughter. Donna, my wife. I know. I tried to meet her once, to warn her. Dennis wouldn't let me anywhere near her." Becky pulled out her phone, scrolled through photos. "I've kept tabs on him over the years. Not because I want contact, but because I need to know if he's escalating. There was an article 5 years ago about a missing boy in Dennis's neighborhood. They found him in a drainage pipe. The police said he'd crawled in there playing and got stuck. But the opening was small. He would have had to be pushed." She showed Mitchell the article. The boy had been 9. He'd died of dehydration before they found him. The police investigated Dennis? Briefly. He had an alibi, said he was home with his wife. No evidence connected him. They ruled it accidental. Becky's expression hardened. But I knew. Dennis has been doing this his whole life. Hurting children, watching them suffer, and getting away with it because he's patient, careful, and people can't imagine their neighbor, their father, their grandfather could be a monster. Mitchell spent 3 more hours with Becky, taking detailed notes. She gave him names of other potential victims, dates, locations. A pattern spanning 40 years. Some incidents were documented, most weren't. Children who'd had accidents in Dennis's proximity. A few who'd disappeared and never been found. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? Mitchell asked. Because he's smart. He spaces them out. Moves locations. Never hits the same area twice in a short period. And he chooses victims carefully. Children whose accounts won't be believed. Situations where accidents are plausible. Becky's voice was bitter. The system isn't designed to catch someone like Dennis. It's designed to give people the benefit of the doubt. And Dennis has spent a lifetime exploiting that. Not anymore, Mitchell said. What are you going to do? Whatever it takes. Back in Chicago, Mitchell went directly to his home office. He didn't greet Donna, didn't check on Danny. He sat at his desk and opened his phone. Found the contact he'd been avoiding using because once he made this call, there would be no going back. The number belonged to Curtis Hodge, a man Mitchell had met 5 years ago during a fraud investigation. Curtis had been the target, a mid-level manager at a pharmaceutical company who'd been selling confidential patient data to third parties. Mitchell had uncovered the scheme, traced every transaction, built an airtight case. But then he discovered why Curtis was doing it. His daughter had a rare genetic disorder. The treatments weren't covered by insurance. Curtis was drowning in medical debt, watching his child suffer because he couldn't afford to save her. The data he was selling wasn't hurting anyone. It was anonymized, used for research. Mitchell had made a choice that violated every ethical principle of his profession. He'd buried the evidence. Presented the company with a report showing the leak came from an external hack, not an inside job. Curtis kept his job, kept selling data until his daughter's treatment was complete, then stopped. He owed Mitchell a debt he could never repay. Mitchell dialed the number. Curtis answered on the second ring. Mitchell? Jesus, it's been years. I need your help with something. Something that's going to require you to break several laws. Curtis didn't hesitate. What do you need? I need to access someone's electronic devices remotely. Phone, computer, anything digital. I need to see everything he's ever done online, every file he's ever deleted, every search he's ever made. And I need it to be undetectable. That's serious federal crime territory. I know. This related to your son? I heard about what happened. News traveled through the old pharmaceutical network. Yes. Curtis was quiet for a long moment. You're sure about this? Completely. Give me the target's information. I'll need 48 hours. Mitchell sent Dennis's details, phone number, email addresses, physical address, everything he had. Then he sat back and waited. Danny appeared in the doorway, his casted arm cradled against his chest. Dad, are you okay? Mitchell looked at his son, at the fear still lingering in those young eyes, the trauma that would probably take years to heal. Yeah, buddy. I'm okay. Everything's going to be fine. Are we going to see Grandpa again? No, not ever. Danny nodded slowly. Good. I don't like him anymore. Me neither. Mitchell pulled his son into a gentle hug, careful of the broken arm. Over Danny's head, he stared at his computer screen, at the digital files accumulating about Dennis Hutchins. Each piece of evidence another nail in the man's coffin. Dennis thought he was untouchable, thought he'd gotten away with it again. He was about to learn otherwise. Curtis Hodge delivered on schedule. 48 hours after Mitchell's call, an encrypted file appeared in a secure Dropbox. The accompanying message was brief, full access established. Mirror updated in real time. Don't leave fingerprints. Mitchell opened the file at 3 in the morning, unable to sleep. The interface Curtis had created was elegant, a complete mirror of Dennis's digital life. Every text message, email, web search, file stored on his computer and phone. Even items Dennis had deleted, Curtis had recovered from backup servers and cached data. Mitchell started with the photos. There were thousands, organized in folders that appeared mundane: fishing trip, family events, vacation 2019. He clicked through them methodically, looking for anything anomalous. He found it in a folder labeled Property Maintenance. The photos weren't of property. They were of places, remote locations, empty buildings, old wells, drainage pipes, abandoned structures. Each photo taken from the perspective of someone scouting, planning, and in several, barely visible in the background or reflected in standing water, Mitchell could make out a small figure. A child. His hands shook as he scrolled through them. Here was Danny, 3 months ago at a park. Dennis's camera focused not on his grandson, but on a drainage culvert in the background. Here was another child, maybe 8 years old, photographed near an old grain silo. And another, and another. Dennis had been documenting his hunts. Mitchell felt bile rise in his throat. He forced himself to keep looking. The photos went back years. Dozens of children, dozens of locations. Most of the photos were just surveillance. Children playing in parks, walking home from school, places they visited. But some showed aftermath. An emergency vehicle. Police tape. News crews. Dennis had photographed his successes. The Cedar Lake photos were there. The well where Danny had been trapped. Dennis had taken pictures of it 3 weeks before the fishing trip. Close-ups of the rotted boards, the depth, the remote location. He'd scouted it, planned it, and then he'd led Danny there deliberately. Mitchell opened the text messages. Most were mundane, communications with Judith, spam, service providers. But there was another category of messages, sent through an encrypted app most people didn't even know existed. Messages to numbers with no names attached. The content was vague, coded, but Mitchell understood codes. He'd spent his career breaking them. Completed project at lake. Subject recovered but damaged. Too much attention. Scouting new location. Timeline 6 months. Previous project unsuccessful. Subject survived. Complications. Each message sent, none received. Dennis was documenting his activities, but to whom? Mitchell dug deeper into the app's data. The messages were being sent to himself, to other devices he owned. Dennis was creating a record, a ledger of his actions. Why would someone do that unless they derived pleasure from reviewing it? Unless the documentation itself was part of the thrill? The browser history was damning. Searches for child accidents, well safety, hypothermia death timeline, broken bones from falls. All conducted in the weeks before Danny's fishing trip. Mixed in were other searches that made Mitchell's stomach turn. Forums where predators shared techniques, case studies of unsolved missing children cases, articles about investigation methods. But the most chilling discovery was a document on Dennis's computer, encrypted but easily cracked by Curtis's software. It was labeled insurance. Mitchell opened it. It was a journal. Detailed entries spanning 3 decades. Each entry described an incident, a child, a location, what Dennis had done, how it had felt. The prose was clinical, detached, describing trauma and suffering the way someone might document a science experiment. But occasionally emotion bled through, a kind of twisted satisfaction. September 1981. SW. Age 12. Storage room, old factory. 3 days. The sounds she made, especially toward the end when she realized no one was coming. That desperation. I sat outside the door for hours listening. Almost waited too long. She was barely conscious when I anonymously called it in. But the timing worked. Next time I'll plan for 4 days. February 1995. KL. Age 8. Drainage pipe. He trusted me completely, thought we were playing hide and seek. The moment of realization when he understood he was stuck, that I wasn't coming back. I wished I could have seen his face. Found 3 days later. DOA. Police investigated, but no connections. Clean. June 2019. MR. Age 9. Storm drain. Convinced him there was treasure down there. Heavy rains forecasted. Didn't account for neighbor's dog finding him early. Survived. Too close to home. Will wait minimum 2 years before next project. October 2024. DP. Age 7. Grandson. Maximum opportunity. Family trust provides perfect cover. Cedar Lake well, scouted extensively. Weather conditions optimal. Cold front moving in. Temperature drop to 38 degrees Fahrenheit overnight. Fishing trip alibi. Execution. Led him near well. Encouraged exploration. Pushed when back was turned. Boards broke as designed. Confirmed he was trapped. Conscious. Calling for help. Listened for approximately 8 minutes before departing. Covered tracks. Delayed return by 9 hours. Subject recovered alive. Unfortunate, but explainable. Emotional response exceeded expectations. The fear in his eyes when I looked down at him. The realization that I wasn't helping. That was worth the risk of survival. Note: family becoming suspicious. Mitchell Powers shows pattern recognition. May need contingency plans. Mitchell read the entry 3 times. The clinical description of his son's terror, the calculation, the pleasure Dennis derived from Danny's suffering. And that final note. Dennis had identified Mitchell as a threat. He kept reading. The journal contained descriptions of 17 incidents. Only 7 had resulted in deaths. The others had survived, traumatized but alive. Like Danny. Like Becky Wong. Like the girl in Gary. But there were gaps in the journal. Years where Dennis didn't write anything. Then sudden entries resuming. Either he'd been dormant during those periods, or there were other victims he hadn't documented. Or other documentation he'd hidden better. Mitchell spent the rest of the night reading every file, every message, every search. By dawn, he had a complete picture. Dennis Hutchins was a serial predator who'd spent 40 years torturing children for his own psychological gratification. He was meticulous, patient, and utterly remorseless. And he documented everything. Mitchell understood now what Curtis had meant about not leaving fingerprints. This evidence had been obtained illegally. Mitchell couldn't simply hand it to police and expect them to act on it. Any defense attorney would get it thrown out as inadmissible fruit of an illegal search. Dennis would walk free, possibly sue Mitchell for invasion of privacy, and then Mitchell would lose everything. His career, his credibility, possibly his freedom. But he'd never intended to use this evidence in court. Mitchell had a different plan. He copied everything to an encrypted drive, then erased all traces of his access. The mirror Curtis had created would continue updating in real time, invisible on Dennis's devices. Mitchell would be able to monitor everything Dennis did going forward. At 7 a.m., Donna knocked on the office door. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. "Mitchell, we need to talk." "I know. This has to stop. Your obsession with my father, it's destroying our family. Danny needs both of us right now, and we're barely speaking. I can't live like this." Mitchell turned his computer screen toward her. "Before we talk, I need you to see something." "No, I don't want to see another conspiracy theory about. It's not a conspiracy. It's evidence. And you need to see it because when this is over, I need you to understand why I did what I'm going to do." Something in his tone stopped her protests. She stepped into the office reluctantly. Mitchell showed her the photos first. The documentation of locations, the surveillance of children. Then the journal. Just excerpts. He spared her the full horror, but enough that she understood. He watched her face as she read the entry about Danny. Watched the denial crack, then shatter. Tears started falling, silent at first, then accompanied by choking sobs. "Oh God. Oh God. Mitchell, I didn't know. I thought. I wanted to believe. I know. All those times I was hurt. The falls, the accidents. He made them happen. He enjoyed it. Yes. And Danny. He was going to let him die. He wanted to watch him die." Mitchell pulled her close, let her cry against his shoulder. They'd been distant for weeks, but in this moment they were united again by the shared horror of what Dennis really was. "What are we going to do?" Donna asked when she could speak again. "I'm going to make sure he never hurts anyone again. Ever." "How?" "If you got this illegally, we can't use it in court." "I'm not going to use it in court." Donna pulled back, studying his face. "Mitchell, what are you planning?" "Something that will work. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She hesitated, then nodded. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to act normal around your mother. Don't let her suspect anything. Dennis can't know what we've found. Not yet. When? Soon. Everything's almost ready." Donna left to check on Danny. Mitchell returned to his computer. He had all the evidence he needed. Now he had to figure out how to weaponize it in a way that would destroy Dennis completely while keeping Mitchell's hands clean. The answer came from an unexpected source. Mitchell had continued his background investigation through Joseph Miranda. Joseph had uncovered something interesting in Dennis's employment history. The pharmaceutical company where Dennis had worked, Midwest Pharmaceutical Distribution, had suffered a major scandal 8 months before Dennis's retirement. A shipment of controlled medications had gone missing, later discovered being sold on the black market. The investigation had been inconclusive, but several employees had been forced into early retirement, including Dennis. Mitchell called in another favor. this time from a former colleague named Philip Davidson who worked in federal law enforcement. Philip owed Mitchell for helping his sister during a nasty divorce. Mitchell had uncovered her husband's hidden assets pro bono. "I need to know about an investigation," Mitchell said. Midwest Pharmaceutical Distribution, 2019. Missing controlled substances. "That case is closed." "Why?" "Because I think the person responsible is about to become relevant again." Philip made some calls. An hour later, he called back. The investigation was closed due to insufficient evidence, but there was a suspect. Dennis Hutchins. They found evidence suggesting he'd been involved, but couldn't prove it definitively. He took early retirement in exchange for the company not pursuing charges. What kind of evidence? Shipping manifests he'd personally signed off on, security footage that didn't quite add up, testimony from co-workers about suspicious behavior. The DEA wanted to pursue it, but the company preferred to handle it internally. Bad publicity and all that. The evidence still exists. In archives, sure. But like I said, case is closed. What would it take to reopen it? New evidence linking the suspect to other crimes. Or evidence that he's continued criminal activity. What? Hypothetically, if someone had proof that Dennis Hutchins was involved in other serious crimes involving children, would that be enough to take another look at the drug theft? Philip was quiet for a moment. "Mitchell, what have you found?" "More than enough. But I need it to come from the right source, through the right channels. Can you help me?" "This off the books. For now. Send me what you have. I'll see what I can do." Mitchell knew he couldn't send the illegally obtained files directly, but he didn't have to. He had something better, a roadmap. He knew exactly where Dennis had stored his documentation, what devices he used, what encryption he relied on. All he had to do was point the FBI in the right direction and let them obtain the evidence legally through their own investigation. But that would take time. Search warrants, proper procedures, bureaucratic processes. Weeks or months. And Dennis might move the evidence, delete files, or, worse, identify another victim before law enforcement could act. Mitchell needed a faster approach. Something that would neutralize Dennis immediately while the legal process played out. He made his final call, to a number he'd memorized but never dialed. It belonged to Ron Downs, an investigative journalist who specialized in exposing predators. Ron had built a career on long-form articles that combined meticulous research with compelling narrative. His work had led to dozens of arrests, policy changes, and public awareness campaigns. They met at a neutral location, a library in a suburb neither of them lived in. Ron was in his 50s, graying but sharp-eyed, with the careful skepticism of someone who'd been lied to professionally for decades. "You said you had a story about a serial predator targeting children," Ron said without preamble. "Yes. How do you know about this?" "Because he tried to kill my son." Mitchell spent 2 hours laying out everything he'd found. He was careful, strategic. He didn't mention the illegal access to Dennis's devices. Instead, he presented the information as having come from interviews with victims, public records, and his own investigation into his son's accident. "I tracked down his half-sister in Portland," Mitchell explained. "She described a pattern going back to her childhood. I found news articles about accidents involving children in areas where Dennis lived or worked. I identified at least 12 incidents over 30 years. Do you have evidence? Witness testimony, patterns, timeline correlations. And I know where the police should look to find digital evidence on Dennis's devices. But I need this story public before law enforcement moves. I need Dennis exposed, his face everywhere, so he can't disappear or destroy evidence." Ron studied him carefully. "You understand that if I publish this and it turns out to be wrong, we're both destroyed. Libel suits, criminal charges, our lives over." "It's not wrong. How can you be certain?" Mitchell met his eyes. "Because I've spent my entire career finding evidence that people think they've hidden. I know how to see patterns others miss. And I know, with absolute certainty, that Dennis Hutchins is a predator who's been hurting children for 40 years. The only question is whether anyone will stop him before he does it again." Ron pulled out a recording device. "I need to interview your son. On record." "No." Mitchell, without the victim's testimony. "My son is 7 years old. He's traumatized. I won't put him through a public interview. Then I need something concrete. The half-sister's testimony is good, but it's decades old. The news articles are circumstantial. I need something that definitively connects Dennis to recent criminal activity." Mitchell had anticipated this. He pulled out a folder containing printed documents, the pharmaceutical theft investigation records that Philip had quietly provided. Dennis Hutchins was forced into early retirement 18 months ago due to involvement in stealing controlled medications. The investigation was buried to avoid publicity, but the evidence exists. Connect that to the pattern of child endangerment, and you have a story about a man with a history of criminal behavior who's been getting away with it because people couldn't imagine their neighbor being a monster. Ron read through the documents. Mitchell watched him process the information, saw the journalist's instincts kick in. This was a story that would make careers, expose institutional failures, and potentially save lives. I'll need to verify all of this independently, Ron said finally. I'll give you every source I have. You'll find it all checks out. And when I publish, you understand that you'll be identified as the source. The father making these accusations. I understand. Dennis and his lawyer will come after you. They'll try to destroy your credibility, paint you as a vengeful father making false accusations. Let them try. Ron nodded slowly. Give me 1 week to verify and write this up. When it publishes, it's going to be everywhere. Are you ready for that? I've been ready since the moment I pulled my son out of that hospital bed. They shook hands. Mitchell left the library with the first piece of his plan in motion. Ron would publish his exposé, turning Dennis from an invisible predator into a public enemy. The attention would force law enforcement to investigate properly. And once they did, they'd find everything, because Mitchell would make sure they knew exactly where to look. But publication was still a week away. 7 days for Dennis to potentially identify another victim to strike again. Mitchell couldn't risk it. He needed insurance. A way to keep Dennis contained and paranoid for the next week, too worried about his own survival to think about hunting. Mitchell drove to Dennis and Judith's house. It was evening, both cars in the driveway. He parked across the street and pulled out his phone, accessing the real-time mirror of Dennis's devices. He composed a text message to Dennis from an unknown number. The message was simple. I know what you are. I know what you've done. You have no idea how fucked you are. He watched through the mirrored interface as the message delivered. Watched Dennis's device show the notification. Then watched as Dennis opened it, read it, and immediately began searching for the sender. Mitchell's phone, using Curtis's software, had routed through multiple anonymous servers. Untraceable. But Dennis wouldn't know that. He'd know someone had contacted him, someone who knew. Mitchell sent a second message. The well. The girl and Gary. The drainage pipe. All of them. I have everything. He watched Dennis's response through the mirror. Frantic searches for privacy protection apps, ways to identify anonymous senders, signs of surveillance. Dennis was panicking. Good. Mitchell waited an hour, letting the fear build. Then he sent the final message. In 7 days, everyone will know. Enjoy your freedom while you have it. Through the mirrored camera on Dennis's phone, Mitchell could see his father-in-law's face. The man looked terrified, scanning his house for hidden cameras, checking windows for watchers. That smug confidence was gone, replaced by paranoid fear. Mitchell smiled. For the first time since Danny fell into that well, he felt something close to satisfaction. The trap was set. In 7 days, Ron Downs would publish his exposé. Law enforcement would have no choice but to investigate. And Dennis, already terrified and paranoid, would do exactly what cornered predators always did. He'd make mistakes. Mitchell was counting on it. The week unfolded with excruciating slowness. Mitchell monitored Dennis's every digital move through Curtis's mirror. The messages had their intended effect. Dennis was spiraling. He'd factory reset his phone twice, installed multiple security apps, and begun searching for ways to permanently delete data from devices. He'd even driven to several electronics stores, buying burner phones and laptops, not realizing that Mitchell could see every purchase through credit card records Curtis had accessed. Dennis was behaving exactly like a guilty man trying to cover his tracks. And every action created more evidence of consciousness of guilt. On day 3, Dennis made his first major mistake. Mitchell watched through the mirror as Dennis logged into an encrypted cloud storage service he clearly thought was secure. He began mass deleting files, thousands of them, photos and documents that represented decades of documentation. But Dennis didn't understand how data recovery worked. Even deleted files left traces, and Curtis's software captured everything in real time before the deletion completed. Mitchell saved it all. Every photo Dennis thought he'd destroyed. Every document. Every piece of evidence. Dennis was essentially handing Mitchell a complete backup while thinking he was protecting himself. On day 4, Dennis tried to access the journal file. Mitchell watched him open it, read through a few entries, his face pale on the mirrored camera feed. Then Dennis deleted it, selected the file, moved it to trash, emptied the trash, and even used a data wiping program to overwrite the disk sectors. Too late. Mitchell had everything saved. On day 5, Dennis became truly desperate. He searched for how to flee the country, countries without extradition, disappearing completely. He looked up false identity services, cash withdrawal limits, and ways to leave without creating a digital trail. Mitchell forwarded screenshots of these searches to Ron Downs with a simple message. Subject showing signs of flight risk. Accelerate your timeline if possible. Ron responded, publishing in 48 hours. Verified everything. This is going to be huge. Mitchell spent day 6 preparing Donna and Danny. He sat them down in the living room, choosing his words carefully. In 2 days, a news article is going to be published about Grandpa Dennis. It's going to say some terrible things about him. Things that are true, but very upsetting. People are going to want to talk to us about it. Reporters might come to the house. Danny, who'd been improving slowly with Dr. Moran's help, looked scared. Is Grandpa going to get in trouble? Yes. A lot of trouble. Good. The certainty in Danny's voice was heartbreaking. He should be in trouble for what he did to me. Donna took Danny's hand. People might say mean things about Dad too. About our family. It's going to be hard for a while. I don't care, Danny said. I just don't want Grandpa to hurt any other kids. Mitchell felt pride surge through him. His son was 7 years old and traumatized, but still thinking about protecting others. That's exactly why we're doing this, buddy. So no other kids get hurt. That evening, Judith called. She sounded distraught. Mitchell, Dennis is acting so strange. He won't tell me what's wrong, but he's been packing bags and talking about taking a trip. He's been deleting things from his computer and phone. I asked him what's going on, and he told me to stay out of it. Her voice cracked. I'm scared. Something's very wrong. Judith, I need you to listen carefully. In the next 2 days, you're going to learn some things about Dennis. Very disturbing things. When that happens, I need you to distance yourself immediately. Get out of the house. Come stay with us if you need to. What are you talking about? Mitchell, what have you done? I haven't done anything. But the truth about who Dennis really is, that's coming out. And when it does, you need to be far away from him. Judith hung up. Mitchell knew she'd probably warned Dennis, but it didn't matter. Dennis already knew something was coming. The question was whether he'd run or try to face it. Mitchell got his answer on day 7, the day before publication. He was monitoring Dennis's devices when he saw the searches begin. Eliminate witnesses, making someone disappear, untraceable methods. Then Dennis searched for Mitchell's address. His work schedule, Danny's school, places the family frequented. Dennis wasn't planning to run. He was planning to eliminate the threat. Mitchell's blood ran cold. He'd anticipated Dennis might panic, might flee, might even try to destroy more evidence. But he hadn't fully considered that Dennis might decide his best chance was to remove the people accusing him. He called Philip Davidson immediately. I need police protection. Now. For my family. What's happened? My father-in-law is showing signs that he might become violent. I have evidence of him searching for ways to harm us. Evidence obtained how? Does it matter? If my family is dead, the evidence won't mean much. Philip was quiet for a moment. I can have a patrol car station outside your house tonight. But Mitchell, if this is connected to what you sent me about the Hutchins case, it's all connected. Your investigation needs to move faster. We're working on search warrants now, but these things take time. Without probable cause. I'm giving you probable cause. Dennis Hutchins is a threat to my family. That should be enough for protective custody or surveillance at minimum. I'll see what I can do. An hour later, a police car parked outside Mitchell's house. The officer, a veteran named Victor Fitzgerald, knocked on the door. Detective Davidson asked me to keep an eye on things tonight. You expecting trouble? Potentially. My father-in-law may try to approach the house. If he does, I need him kept away. Victor studied Mitchell's face. You want to tell me what this is really about? Tomorrow you'll understand everything. Tonight, I just need my family safe. Victor nodded. I'll be out front all night. Mitchell checked the mirror. Dennis's car was in his driveway, but the man himself was moving around the house, visible through his phone's camera as he carried it from room to room. He was agitated, pacing, making no calls or messages. Planning. Mitchell didn't sleep. He sat in his office, monitoring both the mirror and the view from his security cameras. Danny and Donna were asleep upstairs. Officer Fitzgerald was in his patrol car outside. At 2 a.m., Dennis's car started moving. Mitchell watched the GPS on Dennis's phone track his route. He was driving toward Mitchell's neighborhood. Mitchell called Fitzgerald. "He's coming. Black pickup truck, should be here in about 12 minutes. "How do you know?" "Just trust me. He's armed and dangerous. If he tries to approach the house, stop him." Fitzgerald called for backup. 2 more patrol cars arrived within minutes. They positioned themselves strategically around the property. Dennis's truck appeared at the end of the street at 2:23 a.m. It slowed as it approached Mitchell's house, then stopped 2 houses down. Through the mirrored camera on his phone, Mitchell could see Dennis's face lit by the screen glow. He was watching the house, seeing the police presence, realizing his plan was fucked. For 5 minutes, Dennis sat there. Mitchell could see his mind working, calculating. Then the truck turned around and drove away. Mitchell exhaled slowly. The immediate threat was contained. But Dennis was now truly desperate, cornered, dangerous. Tomorrow's publication would push him even further. At 6 a.m., Ron Down's article went live. The headline: "The Monster Next Door, How Dennis Hutchins Spent 40 Years Torturing Children While Hiding in Plain Sight." The article was devastating. Ron had verified everything. Interviewed Becky Wong on record, tracked down Susanna Walker, the girl from Gary, now 45 and still traumatized, found 3 other victims willing to speak anonymously. He documented the pattern of accidents, the pharmaceutical theft, Danny's incident with full details. The article included Dennis's photo, his address, his employment history, everything. Within 2 hours, it had been picked up by major news outlets. By noon, reporters were camped outside Dennis's house and Mitchell's. The story was trending nationally. Hashtag Dennis Hutchins became a hashtag. People were digging into every aspect of his life, finding more connections, more potential victims. The FBI arrived at Dennis's house at 2 p.m. with search warrants. Mitchell watched through the news coverage, helicopters overhead, agents carrying out boxes of evidence, Dennis being let out in handcuffs. The charges, initially, were for the pharmaceutical theft. They'd reopened that case based on the publicity and the evidence of Dennis's pattern of criminal behavior. But Mitchell knew it was just the beginning. Once they examined his devices, they'd find everything. Mitchell had given Philip Davidson a detailed map of where to look. What encryption Dennis used. What cloud services. What deleted files to recover. Everything laid out perfectly so that law enforcement could discover it through their own legal investigation. By evening, the charges had expanded. Production and possession of child exploitation material, the photos Dennis had taken. Multiple counts of child endangerment. Assault. Attempted murder for the Danny incident. Dennis's bail was set at $5 million. He couldn't make it. He was remanded to county jail to await trial. Mitchell watched the coverage with Donna beside him. Danny was with Dr. Moran, getting extra support to process seeing his abuser arrested on national television. "Is it over?" Donna asked. "No. The trial will take months. But he can't hurt anyone anymore. That's what matters." Judith had filed for divorce the same day the article published. She was staying with her sister, making statements to police about what she'd witnessed over the years. Her testimony would be crucial. Mitchell's phone rang. "Philip Davidson. We found everything." "Jesus Christ, Mitchell, the journal alone is going to put him away for life." "How did you know where to look?" "I told you. I'm good at finding evidence people think they've hidden. This evidence is going to be challenged. His lawyer will claim it was planted or tampered with. Then make sure your forensic team is thorough. Everything I pointed you toward was already on his devices. You just had to look in the right places." "Mitchell, did you access his devices illegally?" "I can't answer that. But does it matter? You obtained the evidence legally, with proper warrants, through proper procedures. Whatever investigative methods led you to know where to look, that's not discoverable." Philip was quiet. "You know I have to ask these questions. And I know you don't really want the answers. Dennis Hutchins is going to prison for the rest of his life. That's justice. Is it? Or is it revenge? Can it be both?" After hanging up, Mitchell returned to his office. The mirror was still active. He could still access Dennis's phone, even in jail. The man was making calls to lawyers, crying to Judith, who wouldn't answer, trying to control a situation that was far beyond his control now. Mitchell watched for a moment, then closed the connection. He'd seen enough. The next weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, media attention, and healing. Danny continued therapy, slowly recovering. Donna was dealing with the complicated grief of losing her father, not to death, but to the revelation of who he truly was. More victims came forward. The case expanded. Federal charges were added to state charges. Dennis Hutchins was facing multiple life sentences. Mitchell testified at the preliminary hearing, calm and precise, describing Danny's account of what happened at Cedar Lake. The defense attorney tried to paint him as a vengeful father making false accusations, but the physical evidence, Danny's injuries, the timeline, Dennis's own documented searches before the trip, destroyed that narrative. The journal was entered as evidence. Portions were read aloud in court. People wept hearing Dennis's clinical descriptions of children's suffering. The judge called it one of the most disturbing documents I've encountered in 30 years on the bench. Dennis never showed remorse. Even in court, he maintained that everything Mitchell's firm had grown. After the trial, several companies approached him specifically because of his investigative work on the Dennis case. They wanted someone who could find evidence that others missed, who could see patterns and connections. His business was thriving. But the real success, the real victory, was sitting in the backyard. Danny laughing, Donna smiling, their family intact despite everything Dennis had tried to destroy. Mitchell's phone rang. Philip Davidson. Just wanted to let you know, Dennis was attacked in prison yesterday. Another inmate. He's in the hospital wing now, critical condition. Mitchell felt nothing. No satisfaction, no concern. Dennis Hutchins was simply no longer part of his emotional landscape. Will he survive? Unclear. But Mitchell, even if he does, he's never getting out. You won. You protected your son and probably saved dozens of other children. That's what matters. I know. After hanging up, Mitchell sat quietly. Had he won? In every measurable way, yes. Dennis was in prison. Danny was safe. Justice had been served. But he'd also crossed lines, illegal surveillance, manipulation of evidence, even if he'd been careful to ensure law enforcement could obtain it legally, using his skills in ways that violated every ethical standard of his profession. Would he do it again? Without hesitation. Because some evils required extraordinary measures. Some monsters were too good at hiding, too protected by people's inability to imagine their neighbors capable of such darkness. Dennis had spent 40 years exploiting that cognitive dissonance. Mitchell had simply leveled the playing field. Donna sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. What are you thinking about? How lucky we are. Lucky that our son was nearly killed by a sadistic predator. Lucky that he survived. Lucky that we were able to stop Dennis before he hurt anyone else. Lucky that we're all still here, still together. Donna was quiet for a moment. Do you ever regret how you did it? The methods you used. Mitchell had told her everything after the trial. The illegal access, the surveillance, how he'd orchestrated the investigation while keeping his hands clean. She'd been shocked initially, but understanding ultimately. She knew he'd done what was necessary. No, Mitchell said simply. I'd do worse if I had to. That should probably worry me. But it doesn't. No, Donna admitted. It doesn't. Because I know you'd only cross those lines to protect people you love. That's not a bad thing. Danny ran over, excited about something he'd found, a butterfly with unusual markings. He showed it to them with the enthusiasm of a child who still found wonder in small things, despite knowing how dark the world could be. Mitchell pulled his son close, kissed the top of his head. That's beautiful, buddy. Can we look it up? Find out what kind it is. Absolutely. They went inside together, the three of them, looking up butterfly species on Mitchell's computer. Normal family activity. Like any family on a Saturday afternoon. Except they weren't any family. They were the family that had faced a monster and won. The family that had survived because Mitchell Powers had been willing to do whatever it took to protect his son. Outside, the sun was setting. Somewhere, Dennis Hutchins was in a hospital bed, his life hanging by a thread. Mitchell didn't think about him. Didn't care what happened to him. Dennis was the past. Danny's recovery. His future. The family's healing. That was what mattered now. Mitchell had made a promise in that hospital room 18 months ago. That Danny would be safe. That the monster who'd hurt him would pay. That justice would be served. He'd kept that promise. And that was enough. Was a misunderstanding. That he was being framed. That Mitchell had fabricated evidence. But his own words, recovered from his own devices through legal search warrants, condemned him. The The trial lasted 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 months later. The judge, a woman named Leslie Dunbar who'd presided over hundreds of cases, looked at Dennis with barely concealed disgust. "Mr. Hutchins, in my career I've seen many defendants attempt to justify their actions, minimize their crimes, or express some form of remorse. You have done none of these things. Instead, you've shown nothing but contempt for your victims, for this court, and for basic human decency." She sentenced him to 7 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. Dennis would die in prison. As they led him away, Dennis looked directly at Mitchell. No smile this time, just cold hatred. Mitchell met his gaze calmly, then turned away. Dennis Hutchins was no longer his concern. 18 months after Dennis's conviction, Mitchell sat in his backyard watching Danny play. The boy was 9 now, taller, stronger. The physical injuries had healed. The psychological ones were taking longer, but Dr. Moran said he was making remarkable progress. Danny had testified during the trial, had faced his grandfather in court, and described what happened. It had been terrifying for him, but afterward he'd said he felt lighter. Like putting the truth into the world had released some of the weight he'd been carrying. Donna appeared beside Mitchell, handing him a beer. Their marriage had survived, strengthened even. Facing the horror together had created a bond that felt unbreakable. "Judith wants to visit next week," Donna said. "She's been asking to see Danny. How do you feel about that? She's still my mother." She didn't know what Dennis was. "She's a victim too, in a way." Mitchell nodded. Judith had been instrumental in the prosecution, testifying about patterns she'd noticed but dismissed, incidents she'd witnessed but rationalized. Her testimony had helped establish Dennis's long history of predatory behavior. "If you want to see her, I'm okay with it. But Danny gets to decide if he's comfortable." They called Danny over. He listened to the request, thought about it seriously, the way he approached everything now, with a gravity beyond his years. "I want to see Grandma," he said finally. "But not at our house. Maybe at the park. Somewhere outside." "That's very mature," Donna said. "We'll arrange it." Danny went back to playing. Mitchell watched him, feeling the familiar mixture of pride and grief. His son had been through something no child should experience, but he'd survived. More than survived, he'd found a way to help others by speaking his truth. The case had led to investigations of dozens of other unsolved incidents. 3 more victims had been identified and connected to Dennis. Cold cases were being reopened. One missing child from 2003, a case that had gone unsolved for decades, was finally getting resolution. The family could have closure. Mitchell's phone buzzed. A message from Curtis Hodge, mirror deleted. All access removed. Clean. Mitchell had kept the surveillance active throughout the trial, monitoring Dennis's communications from jail, ensuring he wasn't trying to intimidate witnesses or coordinate any kind of retaliation. But with sentencing complete and Dennis locked away forever, there was no more need for it. He deleted Curtis's contact information. Some secrets were better left buried. Ron Downs had won a journalism award for his expose. He'd used his platform to advocate for better systems to identify and stop serial predators, for believing children when they report abuse, for connecting patterns across jurisdictions. Real change was happening, partially because of Danny's story. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.